Good afternoon and welcome to Praxis Peace Institute's online series. I'm Georgia Kelly, the director of Praxis. Today, we are hosting the creator of an inspiring how-to manual that showcases the incredibly effective policies and projects that are helping people and planet all over the world. Aaron Perry is an author, an entrepreneur, and founder and director of the Why on Earth community and podcast in Colorado. He has launched companies in local and organic food, regenerative agriculture, recycling, and renewable energy. He holds a master's degree in German philosophy, literature, and history from the University of Colorado. He has also studied biodynamics, herbal medicine, permaculture, and indigenous wisdom. He is the author of Our Biggest Deal, Pathways to Planetary Prosperity, which I'm holding up here. And Aaron, could you put in the chat box how people can get this book? Because I don't think it's available in bookstores. You can tell me if it is. Uh,
Absolutely happy to at yonearth.org. I'll put it in the chat box, letter YONEARTHO.org.
and I'll put it in our
And
website too.
we'll provide a code to your audience, gratis, GRATIS, with which folks can download all the ebooks we have, including for this book, for free.
Great.
So
Thank you,
we'll make
Aaron.
that available. Yep.
Great. And you were also a participant in the Praxis 2024 seminar at the Mondragon Cooperative. So I will ask you something about that later. So anyway, welcome, Aaron. It's great to have you with us today.
Thanks so
So,
much, Georgia. I'm so happy to be with you.
well, my first question is what inspired you to do this book, Our Biggest Deal, together with how you went about collecting the stories that are really extraordinary? I was moved by so many of them, if not all of them, and learned a lot of things I had never heard about before. And I read all the time. So I was very impressed. So I'd like you to talk about how you went about collecting them, what your inspiration was, and your focus on collaboration.
Thank you, Georgia. Yeah, happy to. Right on the heels of the publication of my previous major book, which is a visionary eco-thriller novel called Veriditas, as I was wrapping this up, some prose were streaming through onto the screen via the keyboard that I quickly realized were not for that book, but for an entirely different project. And before I even knew what it meant, I began telling friends and colleagues the next major project is going to focus on regenerative finance and economics, which is a theme in the novel, but not necessarily the central point of the novel. And so about 3 years ago, started in on this book, Our Biggest Deal. And I've been doing this work for decades, many decades now, and have gotten to know so many extraordinary folks, yourself included, Georgia, doing amazing work all around the world in all kinds of different contexts, for profit, nonprofit, cooperative, community based, global, etc. And I gotta give a shout out to Maggie McLaughlin, who designs and helps publish all of our books. And because a few years back she said, with the Y on Earth community and all these podcasts that we do, we also have a podcast series, which of course you've been on, Georgia. She said, why don't you do a book that incorporates and includes the knowledge and wisdom of some of these other folks that you're connected to and collaborating with? And I said, gosh, Maggie, that sounds like a lot of work. And it was. Writing a book is a lot of work in the first place, and then coordinating with 28 other authors to include their essays creates a whole nother level of complexity that I, though arduous, have been so happy and grateful to do, because where we're headed, it seems, in terms of structures and strategies and approaches, given the many challenges we face in what some would refer to as the Polycrisis, creates complexity way beyond anything that any single one of us can resolve in isolation. And that, in fact, one of the greatest opportunities and needs we probably have is to work and help cultivate the group genius to emerge among many different perspectives and voices and expertise and so forth. And that really was at the heart of this project. And the book has 5 sections. One of those sections is the collection of essays, and I'm happy to share with your audience all of the authors, including De La Fru's, including yourself. And then the other 4 sections I wrote, and in there is one section that is a set of 33 case study vignettes on what we think are a number of the most exemplary companies, nonprofits, and cooperatives around the world that already are demonstrating, in many cases at scale for decades, what's possible when we structure our organizations and orient our leadership around serving the greater good, as opposed to making a small few of us gazillionaires at the expense of so much else.
Right. Well, one of the things you just mentioned a bit ago was regenerative economics and how your focus has been on that. So I wanted to bring up, since you brought that up already before we go on, I wanted to bring up Bernard Lietaer, who you devote a chapter to in the book. And I think this is very interesting for those of you who don't know. Bernard Lietaer wrote a book called The Future of Money. And it's a brilliant book, and it's like nothing else you would read. And it is available online and on Amazon and all those places. But, and I knew Bernard when he was actually working on that book. He was a neighbor of mine in Mill Valley. But you have also spent time with him, Aaron, and I'm curious to know how he inspired your work, because his idea of money and what, I mean, he talks about the 2 different kinds of money, the money that requires endless growth and one that doesn't. So I'd like you to talk about the yin and yang currencies that he talked about before we go on.
Yeah. Wonderful. Thank you, Georgia. Yeah, Bernard is a dear friend and mentor, and we were sad to have him pass a few years ago. I had the privilege and opportunity over the course of decades to spend time with him in Boulder and to spend hours picking his brain and really digging deep into what's possible when the power of tools like digital currencies can be put to work, again, not to enrich a small percentage of us, but to serve the greater good. And he has, in that book, The Future of Money, which I recommend to so many people, laid out for us not only a pathway into the future, but also a very comprehensive historical retrospective on all kinds of experiments in varying currencies over centuries, both yin and yang style currencies. And that's a way he frames 2 distinct categories of currency, yang being typically fiat interest bearing currency and yin typically having demurrage or negative interest, which incentivizes circulation as opposed to accumulation. And Bernard's point with the 2 yin and yang types of currencies is not so much that we need one and not the other, but that really healthy functioning economies are going to have both working in parallel, in tandem. And so some of the innovations that we speak to in this new book are jumping off, standing on the shoulders of giants like Bernard, helping to envision and create practical pathways to what digital currency can look like as we go forward when it's constructed and deployed in service to the greater good. And I don't know, Georgia, if you want to dive deeper into Bernard's work. There's a whole lot we could talk about there for sure.
I know I'm not sure if that is what would interest people to go into it deeper, but we can spend time going back on it later if you want.
Yeah, and chapter 8 in the book is called The Future of Money, in honor and homage to Bernard.
Yeah. I wanted to go to something that you also really focus on in the book, and that's that our solutions are not going to come out of heroic individualism, but by what you just mentioned, the emergent group genius and network wisdom. And I'd like to ask if there's maybe 1 or 2 you would just like to pull out from the book right now to tell us a little bit about the story of 1 or 2 of them.
1 or 2 examples?
Examples that you've showcased in the book with the essays.
Sure. Well, one that comes immediately to mind is the work being done by the 1% for the Planet ecosystem, which is part of the Patagonia, the broader Patagonia universe, as many of those folks call it. And Kate Williams, who's the chief executive officer of 1% for the Planet, wrote a wonderful essay about leadership. And what 1% is doing as a global network is aligning thousands of mission-driven, ethically based companies, for-profit companies, and taking 1% of their top line gross revenue and channeling that via philanthropic donations into a pool of another several thousand nonprofit social and environmental organizations worldwide. Y on Earth is one of those, to help with the cash flow waterfalls in such a manner that it is stewarding the commons, as it were, both in ecological and social and economic terms. And not only does the 1% for the Planet ecosystem represent what's possible with global networks that are oriented around these types of practices, but they've also accomplished a very compelling and notable growth curve over the last handful of years. Now their for-profit and non-profit membership combined exceeds 10,000 companies. And as I understand it, they're fairly rapidly closing in on $1 billion of certified giving in their framework. I think they're now in the $750 million range, but given the curve, they'll likely hit $1 billion quite soon. So that is notable. And Kate's essay, I highly recommend.
Right. And you remember which chapter that is?
Well, the case study is in the third section, and her essay is in the second section, and it's on page 161. Her essay is called Leading Regeneration. The shortest route is not a straight line.
Okay, I'm going to ask a little more difficult question this time. You wrote, and I quote, "The facades of greenwashing and vacuous rhetoric will no longer suffice to warrant sustained market demand. The third-party certifications, I guess like B corporations and cooperatives, are essential to the survival of businesses in the ecocene economy." That's something I also will ask you to define. But I believe that the market, as we define it today, where people are valued as consumers and not citizens, is giving the market an outsized say in an unfair economic landscape. So how do you see a market operating for the common good? Do we need something other than a market to determine value? What would that look like? So I'd like you to kind of elaborate on that.
Yeah, I love that question, Georgia, and it reminds me of an analogy where we might think of the market as a field, and how we play on that field, whether we choose to play football, aka soccer, or baseball, or field hockey, or some other game, is up to us. But there's a field on which we play a game. And when it comes to markets and economies, it's, I think, easy to sort of abstract them into this other, this monolithic other, when in fact, from a certain perspective, markets can also be understood as a set of relationships and a set of economic exchanges among and between different actors, different people, different communities, different companies, and so forth. And I really wonder about, you know, the isms, the practices, the outcomes, and whether we're, you know, debating the big concepts as being problematic, or we're discussing solutions that are already emerging and demonstrable within the context of global markets like Mondragon. And I wonder if we might focus our conversation on methods, outcomes, practices, thereby helping to further, because it's already evolving, it's always evolving, further evolving the market. I think that in the case of Mondragon, it's such an incredible example. It's one of my very favorites. I knew for decades I wanted to go and visit, and when I finally met you, Georgia, I was elated and so happy I could go do that week-long immersion with you a couple of years ago. And here's the thing about Mondragon, although it is one of the most shining examples, it's moving 11, 12, 13 billion euro a year through its system, not in a vacuum, but by doing business with, guess what, Elon Musk, Tesla, guess what, Airbus, other aerospace and defense companies, right? They're just as enmeshed in the
No,
aerospace.
no, I have to stop you there, Aaron.
Airbus.
They do not supply any military or weapons manufacturers.
No, understood. Understood. When we look at the aerospace industry, we know that that is so entangled that it's difficult to draw a very clear line. They work with Airbus, they work with Tesla, and so we're all implicated. We're all interconnected in this very complex, so complex, none of us is capable of understanding it entirely as an individual. We're all part of this incredible web work. And we're living in a time when I believe we need to make very significant changes at scale. We have great examples of what works way better. And we have opportunities to help transform in the context of market and the context of economics, moving towards systems that work way better for all of us. That's my view.
Right. And I just want to make a little comment there about Mondragon and Tesla and Airbus. Mondragon sells car parts to all major car manufacturers, as you probably learned when you were there. Tesla's just one of many. I'm not sure that I would say, I mean, they do have a business relationship and that they sell to them.
That's true.
So, yeah.
That's true.
It's kind of a bigger conversation in a way, and you could look at it as being contradictory, and in a way it is. And this is part, I think, of moving beyond. We're in the middle of two systems. And I think that you describe it in your book as we're in between, hopefully, between the Anthropocene and the Ecocene, as you describe it.
Yeah.
And we're mixed, and it's not clear which way we're going to end up going. And you do mention that they're like giant babies running the world right now, and that's a serious problem because, as you know, they could lead us to Anthropocene devastation. Quote you exactly.
We're seeing it already.
Yeah, we're seeing it. So it's like we could go either direction right now, and and hopefully, when I'm optimistic, I say we've got a 50-50 chance, because it really looks like a lot of the energy, and especially the money, is moving against us. Greenwashing, of course, is one of those problems, and you mentioned it too. But I want to get to right now some of the businesses that are moving out of this kind of straitjacket that we've grown up in. And you mentioned Climate First Bank. Do you know enough about them to tell us a little about how they're different than ordinary banks?
Yes. I can tell you a little about them. I'm not expert. I would encourage folks to go to their website and check out what Chris Castro, their Chief Sustainability Officer, is doing under the leadership of founder Ken LaRoe and others who's been on the Why on Earth podcast. Climate First Bank is a new bank in the United States, domiciled in Florida, that just last year achieved its blessing from the Fed after its first 3-year period of verification that they know what they're doing and they're doing it well. Now they're able to lend and operate nationwide, so folks in the entire United States, as I understand it, can open accounts with Climate First Bank, can get home loans. And one of the things I just learned about Climate First Bank as the fastest growing new bank in the country is they've already put something like 80,000 solar PV systems on rooftops as part of their lending program. They're lending very strongly into renewable energy, into regenerative land and agriculture. And they also have a very strong commitment to diversity, equity, and inclusion, notwithstanding the tremendous blowback and headwinds that have emerged in the last handful of years when it comes to those issues. Now, one of the other notable things about Climate First Bank, like Amalgamated, Amalgamated Bank, another bank we mentioned in the case study vignettes, that is also US based, they are both members in the Global Alliance for Banking on Values, led by Martin Rohner in Switzerland, and the Mondragon Bank is a member as well. This is a global network of some 80 financial institutions, deposit-taking financial institutions that have made explicit commitments to environmental and social stewardship, verifiable, that include banks in many different parts of the world, developed economies, emerging economies, and so forth. And they're operating, I understand, in something like 45 countries at this point. Just had the opportunity to interview Martin Rohner a week or two ago for our podcast, and I remember that the soon-to-be largest, if not already largest bank in Bangladesh, for example, is a member of the GABV. We also feature GABV in the case study vignettes as its own network and organization. So when it comes to Climate First Bank, look, I don't know enough to say from like an investigative journalism standpoint who they are and what they're about, but what I've learned in our podcasting and other collaboration with them and the research we did for the book, they are committed to the clean energy, the regenerative practices, and are operating their firm with a tremendously progressive culture and approach to people inside and outside the company and the communities in which they work. And I know Ken and many other folks in the Be Certified movement are doing so much outside of their companies for the communities in which they're working and operating and living as well. So I'm a big fan, and I hope that gives at least an impression of who they are, what they're up to. I think they just, in the past few months, got to up over $1 billion in lending on something like $130 to $150 million in capital.
Now, that was the other thing I was going to ask you. You may not know this, and maybe someone like Terry Molnar, who's on this call, might know this. I'm curious if their interest rates for loans are different than regular banks, because that's one of the things that actually is killing our nation, our interests, interest on credit cards, interest on loans. Do you know if they have any different policy on interest rates?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I don't know the answer to that with respect to their loans and credit instruments. I do know they have a wonderful money market offering for all of us where even smaller deposit sizes can earn somewhere in the 3 to 4% yield, which is a lot of the big institutional banks are not providing anything anywhere close to that.
Oh, they don't even give interest. Most of them have no interest.
Right. So there's that. And it all adds up. We know 300, 400 basis points, 500 basis points is a big deal in banking.
Yeah. I'm going to ask you one last question because I know I want to open it up for some questions for you and discussion. But I'd like you to just kind of briefly describe what you call the ecosystem,
Okay.
from the Anthropocene to the ecosystem. So tell us a little bit about that.
Okay, sure. You know, in the book, we've presented a handful of terms and concepts that might be new or might be used a bit differently than we're accustomed to using them. For example, the Earth Steward aristocracy, for example, quintenary economics, which is a neologism with my first major book back in 2017, and or a new term at least. And we've been told we'll get the Nobel Prize in economics for that concept in about 300 years. So I'm patient. I'll wait for that. That'll be fun. But with ecoscene, you know, this is not something I came up with. I know other folks have used ecoscene as a way to contrast with what's being called Anthropocene as a period of time in which human activity is so impactful on our planet. It's in the orders of magnitude of geologic epochs. And so the Anthropocene is something that's come into currency in the last few decades, and more recently this idea of the ecocene is what happens when we hopefully work our way through the pickles we're in and get to a global planetary culture that is now living with stewardship, sustainability, the ethos and principles found in the original instructions from many indigenous cultures, which we speak to in the book in one of the chapters, many of the chapters actually. And we are healing the systems of the living planet as opposed to eroding and undermining and destabilizing and destroying them. So that's something that many of us have come to call the eco-scene, and it's a way of framing and thinking about and working toward outcomes and impacts, I think, Georgia, that are vastly different from what we've been seeing with the Anthropocene.
Right. Yeah, I'd like you, just before we go on, to name some of the people that we would probably know that are featured in the book, people who've written essays for your book.
Yeah,
Mention just a few of them.
of course. Well, I'd like to mention all of them quickly just because they all are worth mentioning. We wouldn't have included them otherwise. Georgia Kelly, of course, I'll mention first. John Perkins, Dilafruz Konik-Bayeva, Mark Finzer, Dr. Rianne Eisler, Dr. Robert Cloninger, Sarah Arau, Kate Williams, Tom Chi, Jack Wielebinski, Samantha Power, Dr. Stephanie Gripney, Audrey Wyckoff, Eduardo Esparza, Hannah Odell, Dr. Jandel Allen Davis, Steve Farrell, John Rogers, Miranda Clendenning, Hunter Lovins, Dr. Martin Frick, Henry Mitchell, John Milton, Maria Rodale, Elena Maslova, Kevin Townley, and Gowenio Stajak. Those are the 28 that we invited to contribute to the book, and I highly encourage everybody to read what they have to say, because not only is each piece powerful on its own, the web work and ecosystem of all of them together is extraordinary.
Agreed. And thank you for offering the PDF, which I will send out. Now I want to open it up to questions. I have muted you, so if you just know that you're all mute. So if you want to ask something, you have to unmute.
The PDF, we are, Georgia, just to clarify, on our website, if folks want the ebook, they can use the code GRATIS to download that for free. And that's at whyonearth.org, which I put in the show notes.
Great. Hey, Jerry
chat.
Jerry has his hand up. Do you want to go ahead?
Yeah. Aaron, what's your understanding of the relationship between economic growth and climate change?
Well, that's a good question, Jerry. It reminds me of a graduate seminar I took when we had a climate scientist return from his post as an appointee of the George W. Bush White House at the time. Dick Cheney was holding closed-door sessions with the energy industry, including Enron, where their projections for inflation matched exactly their projections for the price of oil. And I thought, gosh, what's going on here? I think that certainly when we consider a number of the key variables that we've been looking at for several decades now, consumption, population, carbon emissions per capita and equivalent or proxy, carbon in soil, carbon in ocean water, acidification, all these different pieces that are connected to and or driving climate destabilization as our best science understands it. There's clearly a correlation under present conditions and present behaviors between economic growth and accelerated climate destabilization. Now, what is often mistaken from that statement, which we think to be true, is that economic growth is always bad, right? Because we could envision, and we do in the book, other economic activities and conditions and impacts, much like what we see in communities like the Mondragon community, where we have frothy economic activity, but the net benefits are shared, distributed. The stewardship is solid. The abuse and misuse of the quote unquote commons is mitigated. And so I would caution that we don't come to a conclusion that all economic growth is necessarily deleterious. That said, looking around the world, there's 8 billion of us. There's a whole heck of a lot of infrastructure that we've already deployed, and systems and structures that are at work perennially that are clearly connected to a destabilizing climate.
Can I make one more comment?
Yeah, just make one comment before we go on. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, a couple things. First, are you? I highly recommend that you look at a book called "Is Science Enough" by Aviva Chomsky. And I'm an environmental lawyer, and I've spent the last 10 years immersed in the climate crisis. And I think overall we need to lower our overall demand on energy. And the thing about Mondragon is that, and Georgia has said this a number of times, one aspect of Mondragon is an acceptance that enough is a viable concept, and we don't have to keep on trying to get more.
Oh,
so
yeah. Yeah.
My understanding is basically that economic growth and solving the climate crisis are incompatible. And I'll just leave it at that.
And thank you, Jerry. And I'll just add, because we haven't mentioned this yet, one of the other sections in the book is a collection of aphoristic musings. We call them aphoristic amusings. I'm a Nietzsche scholar, and so took the liberty to write some very short form, hopefully funny and humorous at times, pieces that point to some of this. And this question of what's enough appears in several of them. You'll have fun. The titles are fun. For example, there's one that's called "There's No Soil at Burning Man." And for folks who are aware what's going on with the financial, fintech, and technology sectors and things like Burning Man, that has a lot of meaning on a lot of levels. Anywho, I would encourage you all to take a look at some of those aphorisms as well.
Okay, Alan, you have your hand up.
Yes. So I'm interested in the various kinds of public banking. Some of it, like in California, we're thinking of the North Dakota basis, who've been successful since the early part of the last century. So, and I know some of the things you're talking about are basically like a public bank, but I wish you were more elaborate.
Yeah. Look, I'm not a banking scholar, so I don't want to give the impression that I am. Would a credit union fall under that category or no?
No, it's different.
Okay. So, Alan, that's something I can look into more, and I'd love to learn more about it.
You know, a good place to look into that is Ellen Brown. She wrote a book called The Web of Debt and the Public Banking Solution. The public banking solution is particularly about what public banks do and don't do. They're basically created for the public good.
Yeah, send me the summary. I'll check it out.
Yeah, Ellen Brown is the person, and there's the Institute for Public Banking that she began, and there's a whole movement in California to create public banks. Terry,
by the way,
go ahead.
Like you, Georgia, one of the things I love about podcasting is I get to go to school on each guest. I'd love to interview her because it means I'll learn a lot. We've published nearly 175 episodes now, and you could also find those at whyearth.org, and we also do video and audio. So, I would love to connect with her.
I'll connect you with her. I did an interview with Ellen a while ago on public banking, and it's on our YouTube channel.
Cool.
So, Terry, go ahead. You're mute, Terry.
Yeah, I had that on mute. Aaron, nice to meet you.
Likewise.
And is John Rogers the John Rogers that runs the mutual fund in Chicago?
Different John Rogers.
John Rogers, okay. I'd like to pull from you after done this work and all these 28 people, and your work you've done in the world. In a few words as possible, what is your world view about how we're going to get ourselves out of the current mess we're in?
Hey, sorry, could you just repeat that? I didn't hear all
Sure.
of it.
What is your world view of how we're going to get ourselves out of the current economic and environmental mess that we're in right now? I'd like to pull that out of you if possible.
Isn't that fun? I was going to ask
So,
something like that.
yeah, I mean, I actually was just going to answer by saying, I think it's not going to be easy, but it's going to be a lot of fun. It's, I think, if we're going to be getting through this, it's going to mean we will have not only mobilized a huge swath of humanity to go to work on these complex and interconnected issues, but that we're also continuing to demonstrate and amplify and shine light on the solutions that are already exemplary in addressing the complex intersections of human, social, economic, and ecological stewardship and responsibility, right? And we got to talk about responsibility. Right now in this culture in particular, there is such an overwhelming sense of entitlement, of I got to get mine first, of the commons be damned or whatever, and this is a deep psycho-spiritual pathology. It's something we address very deeply in the novel I wrote, Veriditas, that I previously mentioned. There's something going on that is not just about economic and financial and banking systems. It is psychological, spiritual, cultural. We are in this time where we're nuts. We've gone mad as a collective. There's such madness. I believe personally that we can get through this and heal and make tremendous deep change, but it's not necessarily easy. But like Kennedy said, we're not doing this because it's easy. We're doing it because we need to do it, because there's an imperative, right? Now, I do have some personal views, and we're about to launch a major project. There's going to be a major investment opportunity opening up in Q1 of the coming year. We essentially open source the high-level executive summary of the new project in chapter 4 of this book, the end of chapter 4. We're working on some of the things we're seeing as being important. I think what's also extremely important is that we come to understand that much of what's needed is for us not to be on Zoom and phones and screens, but to be out at the farms with the soil, in the forests, with the water, more connected with the natural living world as our ancestors were by definition. Because in there lies certain wisdom and knowledge and fabric of intelligence that frankly becomes weakened and thinned in our modern urban contexts. And so, yeah, there's plenty. I'd be happy to chat in detail at length about all of this some more. But I think you'll find in the 4th chapter at least some directional discussion of what we're working on. And I think this is another important point. There's not one solution or one organization or one person or group of people. It's a whole bunch, right? Collaborating and cooperating and working with mutual benefit as much as possible.
And now I'm going to bring up something that I think is that we're up against and that we have to look at, and we can paint our rosy pictures of what the eco scene can be and what our contribution to it can be and working together. But we're also up against very strong forces. And we, I think, have to know how to deal with them. One is we live in a war economy in the US. We have been at war ever since World War II, from one place to another.
No, we've been at war since
with this.
3 to 5,000 BC.
Well, but in our country, which is young, we've been at war all through our lifetime.
Yeah.
And it's only accelerated, more money going toward it, more control. We have a surveillance system, a controlled media. And right now, the US is still at the apex of all this. So what happens here tends to filter out through the world. And I feel like it's important that we know what we're up against and have some idea to protect against these forces. Because as we start coming together and collaborating across different sections of the society, we are vulnerable to being infiltrated, picked off, all kinds of things. So I think we also need to understand what we're up against, not only what we're creating, but what we're having to resist and know about. And I want anyone to speak about this because this is something I think about a lot.
You know, I agree wholeheartedly, Georgia. And in the novel Veritas, there is an extremely deep dive into the deep roots of this, and it's not something that I was the first to talk about. We've got folks like Rianne Eisler, who's in her 90s, who is a survivor, a refugee of the Holocaust, who wrote one of the essays in the book and who speaks to the distinction between the partnership society and the dominator society. And she rightly, as an anthropologist, sees the origins not with World War II or World War I, but thousands and thousands of years ago, where that really is situated as far as we can tell with our knowledge and information about that. We are up against tremendously challenging forces. There are names for them in certain traditions. You could call it mnemonic, whatever you want to call it. And it's deep-seated, it's pervasive. We each have it inside of us to some degree or another. That's the reality. And I am so hopeful that we have elders like Rianne, who continues to this day to be so sharp and so strong in her vision and advocacy of what's possible. And she's continuing to lead so many of us. She just hosted a big global conference a few weeks ago. It's right to say that these are deep-seated, long-standing challenges, and I believe that it's also right to say that things don't have to be this way. And really, what's one of the things that's in question here is what really is the nature of human nature. And I love that so many wise folks have been speaking to that for a long, long time.
That's a really important thing you just brought up about what is human nature and what are the possibilities. Brienne's book, Nurturing Our Humanity, I think deals a lot with what you were just talking about. It's her latest book, which she wrote maybe 4 years ago, it came out, and it's really, I feel like it's the pinnacle of her.
She's so great. Yeah, we just had her on the podcast a few weeks ago, and my gosh, she is tremendous.
Yeah, incredible person.
By the way, in the book, the collection of essays spans something like 4 generations,
yes,
depending on how we're counting. There's 70 almost years of age difference between the oldest and youngest author in the book.
That's great. Terry, you wanted to say something?
There's so much, as Georgia knows, that I could bring up here. The main thing I want to just put into our thinking right now is the thing that I think is not being talked about, which I think is the most important thing that's actually going on. This country was built on a vision that our 3-part system of government and democracy and all this would end up giving priority to the common good. It's glaringly obvious that it's not doing it. 66% of the people live paycheck to paycheck. 40% of the people on Social Security don't have enough to live on, and they've paid into it their whole lives. And so there's a justification for a lot of people to be upset.
Yeah.
And since we live in the information age, I mean, I grew up in Omaha. I had no idea what was going on in New York and Washington, D.C. and San Francisco. Now everybody knows the information I just gave to you. You know, so what I think happened in the 2 elections that had Donald Trump get elected, it wasn't that people were mainly voting for Donald Trump, because it's only those people in the independents that determine who wins the election. What I think swayed them was they were angry. And to vote for, I don't even know, for Hillary Clinton who had proven herself that she was the establishment and that she was therefore the system. And the same thing with Joe Biden and Kamala Harris. They came across as the system. So if you only have two choices and what your priority is to vote against the system, you're going to vote for Donald Trump. So what I don't think is being talked about is what is it that's causing us not to give priority to the government? Well, and I could tell you the whole history of this, which I've written extensively about. But basically, in 1812, with the War of 1812, what came out of that is we ended up in a whole series of things that gave priority to maximizing the financial return to the individual as the thing that's most important in society, not the common good. And it's been going that way ever since. So the thing that's not being talked about that I started with was the system does not give priority to the common good. The system gives priority to a few people being able to be billionaires.
Yeah.
And so we need to speak to this.
Yeah.
But if you speak to this in the main media, you'll be called a socialist or a communist.
Right.
And so nobody's comfortable speaking about this, even if they think about it, which I think most people don't think about. So the thing that I want to bring into the conversation, Aaron, is I think what really happened is people voted against the system and it was to do so, but they didn't have a good option. And Joe Biden didn't have a clue of the depth of the unhappiness with the economic system.
Democratic Party in general didn't have a clue.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you, Terry. It's
I
by the
would
way,
agree
so,
with that.
so nice meeting you, Terry, Jerry, Alan. I'd love to learn more about the 1812 piece. I love history, Zinn, Chomsky, etc. I would really love to learn more about what you've been focused in on there. And as far as I'm concerned, we're all in this together. We're all learning. We have a lot to learn from each other, and I certainly would love to continue to learn from you all.
And you do talk about the common good in your book quite a bit.
Yes.
Collaboration, the common good, working together. It's a theme in the whole book.
Yeah, basically.
It is. But don't you find it appalling that nobody, I watch the news, you watch the news.
Is talking about it?
Nobody brings this up. Nobody brings this up. It's just stunning.
Well, it's anathema to what we're supposed to care about, the individual.
What I'm experiencing is a whole lot of us are discussing this offline.
Offline, that's right.
Yeah.
So mycelial networks are underground. Remember this. The word radical is etymologically the same as the word root, radish, all that. There really is literally and metaphorically something about the soil and the mycelia and all of this, and we talk about that quite a bit in the book as well.
And that's a very interesting point. And I think the mycelia, how it connects everything under the ground, you don't see it. You don't see the connection, but it's all happening, and it all makes the trees work. It makes soil work. It's pretty extraordinary. We've never really looked at that in our society as a connecting mechanism. So I think
so Aaron and Georgia and Jerry and Alan, I'm about to finish a book right now.
Great.
And the focus of the book that I'm finishing is that humanity is going into the next stage of maturity.
Yeah.
As a whole.
Yeah.
The reason we're having all this perturbation right now is because that's what transition is like. So we're going from operating on the assumption the universe is separate parts and we're only one of them. We're each one of them. Competition is a fundamental process. To the next stage, which I call the oneness stage, when we get that the most fundamental fact.
You need to speak closer to the mic, Terry.
Okay.
We lose some of what you say.
Okay. I don't know where I should do that. So that the what I'm trying to get at, Aaron, is that I think the fundamental thing going on here is a maturation into the next stage where we get the oneness of nature, not from some spiritual tradition, but from physics.
And experience, direct experience. I agree with you.
Well, for thousands of years, anybody could have looked at the horizon where the ocean meets the ocean meets the sky. And when you look at it, it looks like a straight line. But if you're sitting on the edge of the ocean and you look at 180 degrees, it's a perfectly half circle.
Yeah.
If you watch a boat disappear from the bottom up, it's
Yeah.
obvious the earth
Yeah.
is round. We've been able to directly experience it with our eyes for thousands of years. And yet only 500 years ago did we start to have it become common knowledge, what is self-evident. I feel the same thing is happening here with the fact that the universe operates as an undividable whole.
Yeah.
And the first chapter of the book is 11 questions, where when you answer the 11 questions in the order I provide them, you can no longer fool yourself into that's not as obvious as the earth is round. And so that's going to take us. And so the only way that you stop this regression back to dictatorship is to be making the progression into the next stage of maturity. That's where passion and courage and enthusiasm emerge. We can't do it by simply saying what's going on is wrong.
Hear, hear.
Yeah.
Hear, hear. Listen, I put my email in the chat. I'd love, Terry, to see your book when it's ready and continue the conversation. And by the way, with respect to physics and intelligence and consciousness and the cosmic web, there's an article by Vaza and Folletti regarding the 3D mapping of the cosmos that is extraordinary, that I keep on my desktop because I share so frequently with folks. Anyway, and Fritjof Capra's work is so important with all of this, and his Capra course starts its next cycle in February, and he's 87 now, and it's so special to have time to interact directly with him these days too.
Now, is his course on Zoom? Is it online?
Yeah.
Yeah, I'd be interested in knowing more about it.
We have special discount codes for the Y on Earth community, and already their pricing is very fair and is a big sort of sliding scale. But we have additional discount codes, and just email me, and I'll be happy to share those. I don't have them at my fingertips, otherwise
Okay.
I'd provide them right now.
I will email.
And,
I'll send you an email, my email, so we'll connect.
Great, yeah.
That's good. Anything else before? Let's see. You've got like 4 minutes or a little bit.
Yeah. And I'm at this library that literally closes in 4, and I asked him, please let us finish, and then I'll pack up and get out of here. I'm on the road. I'm on the road right now. So.
Are you in Boulder? Is that where you live?
Just outside Aspen. I live outside Boulder in a town called Lyons, but I've been in Aspen all week for meetings with a bunch of friends and colleagues. We're working on this. We're launching this big new mycelial tech, beautiful thing that I'm happy to share about with you guys at some point too, if you're interested. Anyway, on the road, and we managed to get a room in a library for the conversation today. And Georgia, thank you so much for inviting me on.
Oh, this is going to be fun. I really appreciate your taking the time, especially when you're on the road like this. We had a miscommunication about which day it was, so I'm glad it worked out.
Yeah, it worked out just fine.
Thank you so much. Really appreciate it. I'll be back in touch with you shortly too. And if anyone else wants to stay on for a few minutes, I'm here.